Thank you, Gina. It's my pleasure to introduce Dean Leonard Baynes, who's going to preside over what has become a perennial favorite at this conference, the Dean's Panel, to discuss a matter of interest to the energy community. Really, Dean Baynes needs no introduction. He is now the longest serving dean of any Texas law school, having, what is your 10th anniversary just recently? Yes. Congratulations to all of us in the University of Houston community for having Dean Baynes as our dean. I believe it was 8 years ago now, Dean, that we talked about having this conference that would bring a unique sort of addition to energy conferences, and that it would bring policymakers, academics, and people from industry together to talk about areas of interest. With that, I will turn it over to Dean Baynes and look forward to this year's panel as always.
Thank you so much, Susan, and thank you, Blank Rome. Let's give them a round of applause. 8 years of partnership with UH, we really appreciate it. And thank you, Susan, for your leadership, because this would not have happened but for her leadership, and we're really thankful. And thank you for all of you being in the audience today. As Susan mentioned, for the past 8 years, I brought together a group of really esteemed business leaders and legal leaders to talk about issues of the day in this field, but beyond the field. Because I think sometimes when you go to these conferences, and I'm not an expert in energy or in environmental law, it's like very deep in the weeds. But leaders, business leaders and legal leaders have to look more broadly to a variety of things, societal issues that may be affecting them. And many times we've heard really incredible stories in terms of insights that they have for issues that may confront them or the industry. So I'm very pleased that we have this esteemed panel here today, and it doesn't do me justice to introduce them. I want them to introduce themselves briefly to give you a sense of the great things that they do and have done in their leadership roles. So I want to start with Gregory on the far end.
Thank you, Dean, and thank you, everyone, for having me here. My name is Gregory Brown, and I am the General Counsel of Evolution Well Services. Evolution Well Services is a hydraulic fracturing company, but our claim to fame is we do it a little bit differently. We are 100% electric, no diesel fuel used in the process at all whatsoever. The electricity comes from a jet engine turbine, which we package into our own design, place in the field. It runs on field gas to generate electricity, to power pumps and motors to do the traditional hydraulic fracturing process. So it's somewhat of an ESG play because the emissions are much less than traditional diesel fuel. It's quieter. You don't have the traffic running back and forth, disturbing Farmer John and his cows. Requires fewer employees to run and operate. I've been there since 2016. Prior to that, I was General Counsel of U.S.A. Energy, which was an oil and gas E&P company, dime a dozen here in Houston. And prior to that, I spent 16 years with Aiken Gomp and Jackson Walker here in Houston, practicing commercial litigation, contract disputes, things of all type. Very happy to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Gregory. Next up is Carrie Clark.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carrie Clark. I am a 25-year industry veteran. I started my first job at Shell in New Orleans in 1998, after I graduated from Texas Tech undergrad with a double major in petroleum land management and finance. I've worked as a landman for a while before coming to law school at the University of Houston. I'm a mom and wife, and I have 3 children, 21-year-old daughter, 18-year-old son, and 16-year-old daughter, which I mentioned specifically because they were all here with me in some form when I was in law school at U of H. So my oldest was 1. I had my second right before the end of my 2L year, and I was pregnant with the third when I took the bar. So it was quite an experience. I am currently the Chief Commercial Officer of a company called Blackstone Minerals. We're a publicly traded mineral company primarily. We do have some working interests as well, but I have worked for large companies, small companies, public companies, private companies. I was in the job right before this. I worked at University Lands for 6 years, where we managed all of the public university fund lands that had been granted or set aside for higher education support when Texas was still a republic, actually. 2.2 million acres of fee, surface, and mineral acreage on behalf of the University of Texas and the Texas A&M systems, which during the time I was there delivered over $1 billion of free cash flow into the endowment every year. So I'm honored to be here today and look forward to this panel discussion. I think it's going to be very good.
Thank you, Carrie. Next up is Deonne Cunningham Nauls.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Deonne Cunningham Nauls, as the dean just said. I am a graduate of the Law Center and of the University of Houston, native Houstonian. I received my first job in oil and gas when I was an intern in high school, at Lamar High School, at ExxonMobil. And then went into politics a little bit before entering law school. And I could go over my resume of the last few years, but it seems that it changes every 1 to 2 years. Last year, I was the general counsel of GlidePath Power Solutions, which is an independent power producer based out of Chicago. And as of last year, I switched jobs to a hedge fund, which is owned by Bill Perkins. And it is managed by Skylar Capital Management, LP. Bill Perkins used to be a former natural gas trader from Enron and from Centaurus Energy, and formed his own hedge fund, and they needed a new general counsel, so I was happy to join of July of last year. We do a range of investments in the natural gas storage space, as well as some developing projects on the battery power, battery storage and solar wind power side. I am a mom of a 2-year-old. I don't know how I've done all of this in the span of in the last 3 years, but I'm happy to be a part of the panel again this year, and thank you again for welcoming me aboard.
Absolutely. Next, Cody Johnson.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me, Dean Baynes. My name is Cody Johnson, and I went to undergraduate, got my undergraduate degree from Stephen F. Austin in Nacogdoches, where I achieved the most important thing in my life. I met my wife 30 years ago, and started my first business right after leaving Stephen F. Austin. Sold that business, started a second business, and decided I wanted to go to law school while I was growing the business. So I got my law degree in 2009 from University of Houston. I'd grown my second business large enough where I sold that business to a private equity group 1 year after graduating from University of Houston Law School. Since then, I've gotten several certificates from Harvard Business School in executive education, in strategy, senior leadership, and artificial intelligence. Today, I am, and for the last year, I've been leading a company, SCS Technologies. This is the 4th private equity company that I didn't start that I'm a CEO of. And we primarily design, manufacture, and service methane fugitive gas recovery units for upstream oil and gas. Methane is 40 times more potent as a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide, so it's also very important with regards to carbon management. And then on the midstream side, we do measurement and custody transfer equipment, and that for a variety of molecules, and in this setting, the most important of those are hydrogen and CO2. I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you, Cody. Next is Linda Primrose.
Hi, everyone. I am Linda Primrose. I'm the General Counsel and Corporate Secretary for Mitsui, U.S.A. I lead a team of 12 who are based in Texas, California, and New York, and we take care of the legal function for the U.S. and Canada for all of our industries. wide range of industries, energy, chemicals, infrastructure, mobility, iron and steel, food and retail, wellness, you name it, we touch it. We also have about 36 group companies and investments in the U.S. and Canada as well that we take care of. I've been with Mitsui since 2006. I started as a counsel in the New York office and have just been working my way up. I moved to Houston in 2005 and became the general counsel 3 years ago. Prior to joining Mitsui, I was a corporate and commercial markets attorney at Cravath, Swaine & Moore for 5 years in New York. And prior to that, I have a bachelor's in biology and a master's in environmental science. So I've done consulting work in engineering and environmental for several years before and during law school. So I have a wide range of backgrounds and experience, and Mitsui does a lot of work in traditional oil and gas as well as in renewables. So we're all along the hydrocarbon chain, but also in new technologies. So this is a very interesting panel for me as well. Thank you.
Thank you. You can see we have a powerhouse panel. And so one of the things that's so interesting to me is sort of how business leaders and legal leaders look at these issues that confront us. And the first thing is, we know energy and environmental issues are global in scope. And so one thing is that a few years ago, they were talking about the Ukraine war and what the impact of the Ukraine war would have on energy prices and market stability in Europe and overall. And more recently, I've learned that there's actually still a 5-year agreement between Ukraine and Russia for the transport of natural gas, and this is likely to expire soon. And that Russia has confirmed there's no negotiations. So this may have an effect on our industry. And so the question is, what are you all thinking about preparing for that in this, and how does it have any effect on energy transition? Why don't we start at the end again? Gregory.
Sure, happy to take the question. In terms of the Russian-Ukraine war and their agreements, I presume soon to be lack of agreements, because I can't imagine there's going to be much renewal of those agreements given what's going on. It doesn't necessarily have a very direct impact. To the extent it has an impact on our company, it's more of an indirect impact via our customers. We happen to provide hydraulic fracturing services for some very large E&P operators. Most of them are doing business in the Permian, of course, but a number of them are also in the Marcellus and the Utica, very gassy plays. To the extent that natural gas supplies in Europe become tighter, obviously America is able to move into that position and sort of fill some of the gap. So it'll be more business for our customers, which presumably will be more business for us. There is one sort of wild card. I understand, the president has sort of placed a moratorium on new LNG permits and facilities, which could potentially impact our customers. But right now, it's looking pretty good from our perspective, and we don't anticipate it to have much of a direct impact.
Thank you, Carrie.
Yeah, thank you. So as a minerals company, we are often don't have as much control over things, development of the oil and gas assets that we own. But in relevant to this question is that we are largely most of our minerals and the resource under the acreage that we own is natural gas. So we're heavily weighted natural gas, approximately 70% gas and 30% oil. And if you live in Houston or read a newspaper ever in the last 6 months to a year, natural gas prices are continue to take a big hit. But for us, we believe that not just with the Ukraine war, but the overall global geopolitical uncertainty, as it often does, creates opportunities for industrial businesses. And again, with the focus on, and I don't want to steal this point from Cody, at our pre-discussion, he made such a great point about energy security, but we believe the LNG story and the need to create fungibility, more fungibility to meet the ongoing and growing need for natural gas globally is real. We think the timeline is, generally for the projects that are scheduled or that have already hit FID, we believe that timeline is probably going to be pretty on track. And one sort of nuanced thing is that people talk a lot about the LNG facilities, but the infrastructure that's needed to free up the congestion for associated gas from the Permian to have a direct path that is not interfering with, for example, our largest net interests are on the Gulf Coast in Louisiana and in the Haynesville and in the Austin Chalk. And so just a point of information, for example, the Matterhorn pipeline that should be coming on in September of '24 is going to open up a path that is directly from Waha to the Houston Ship Channel, which will divert some of that natural gas that's congesting in Carthage in Louisiana. And so how all of these things fit together, I think is just bolstered by the geopolitical uncertainty. And that's how we view a natural gas price recovery that is tied to the growing demand for LNG.
Thank you so much. Deonne?
Yeah, and to piggyback off of what
You're off someone.
To piggyback off what you're saying, Carrie, on the natural gas congestion and just the infrastructure around it, that's one of the things that our company, well, our fund, Skylar Capital Management, is very keen on. It's a fundamentals trading shop, so Bill Perkins has spent a lot of money in acquiring different data and analytics, building different data and analytics with his various ventures, and looking at the different types of congestions that may be taking place in pipelines and storage facilities in the domestic, in the U.S. Domestically. So the geopolitical space has been something that is always being looked at on a day-to-day basis, minute-to-minute basis at our fund. The impact, as we know, has led to extreme scarcity pricing for winter 2025, and there's a tight situation where Europe doesn't have much room to bear any. Sorry. Oh, sorry. Okay. Is this better?
Switch, because you could give her you probably project, and she's not projecting as much as.
What did you call me?
Is this a little bit better? Okay, all right. Let me just go back to the beginning. So my fund, we like risk, we like volatility in the pricing, and right now, as you can see with the natural gas pricing and the geopolitical climate, it has flattened the prices in that area. So the scarcity pricing for winter 2025 in areas in Europe due to this war increases potential energy crisis for years to come, particularly if this agreement is not reached between the Ukraine and Russia, which I actually think it will be at some point by the end of this year, but you never know. Europe, although there is the issue with the agreement between the Ukraine and Russia, Europe is still relying on U.S. LNG imports that are coming, exports that are coming in, and I think that's going to continue, even with the moratorium on the new LNG projects that Biden has come across, for the U.S., sorry, this threw me off a little bit. For the U.S., this would, if the agreement doesn't take hold at the end of this year, and there are no negotiations that are reached, this would hearken us back to the early stages of the war, 2022, where U.S. gas exports rose sharply with deliveries to Europe and Asia. U.S. gas exports have been crucial in the European market, will continue to do so. with coal production on a decline in Europe, and the agreement falling away, would spur a scaling up. If we're talking about the energy transition, it would spur a scaling up of offshore solar and wind power in those areas.
Thank you. Cody, you had mentioned someone mentioned about energy security, and you mentioned that before. What about energy security?
Yeah, to build on what Carrie said. And Gregory. Now, I was a delegate to the World Petroleum Congress last year in Calgary, and one thing that we talked about with a lot of global leaders at the conference was that this was the war in Ukraine was not only risk on for energy security, but that meant risk on for energy from renewables. You can't prosecute war with wind and solar, right? And so if we want to reach our carbon neutral goals, we're going to have to do that with hydrogen and carbon capture and sequestration. That's in a nutshell what this means. And so that's a point, right? And then the other thing I think that needs to be layered on that is, think about 10 years ago, if I told you that Russia's at war, Ukraine is bombing refineries 900 miles behind the lines successfully with drones, and there's a war in the Middle East. Iran just lobbed 300 missiles at Israel, and natural gas is $1.75.
Yeah.
Who would have been over and who would have been under on that bet? Who would have been long on that? Nobody, right? WTI at $82 a barrel. How's that possible? It's possible because of the Permian Basin. It's possible because of Texas. It's possible because of the energy that we're producing in this state. If we're not producing crude and we're not producing natural gas along the Gulf Coast and in the Permian Basin, WTI is 2 to 3 times that today. Natural gas is probably over 10, 12 bucks. And so I think, so my point I'd like to bolt on to everyone else's is this is a unique opportunity for our state and for our industry. We're going to probably, to put a finer point on Carrie's comment, I'm bullish and long on natural gas. And it's going to be West Texas natural gas. It's going to come from the Permian Basin. It's going to come through our pipelines, and it's going to come to the Gulf Coast. And a lot of it's going to be used for steam methane reforming within 75 miles of where we're sitting right now. And all that CO2 today is being puffed out into the atmosphere. We can capture that and we can sequester it. And then we have carbon-free hydrogen, and we have an export market begging for it in Europe because they're not going to be getting it from Russia.
Thank you, Cody. Linda?
I won't belabor the point. I'll just add on that Mitsui is positioned for taking advantage of these as well. We already have an LNG facility that's permitted and operating in Cameron Parish in Louisiana with our partners Total, Sempra, and Mitsubishi. We're looking at adding another train. We're also working on a hackberry carbon sequestration company that we applied for our Class 6 permit in August of 21, so we're hoping this year. And so, we did see incredible spikes in the LNG exports in pricing to Europe. We did benefit from that from a profit perspective, but it is also spurring on additional, construction, innovation, and other projects.
Thank you. So I'm going to shift a little bit because I think the first and two questions we had prepared for us are related. So I'll go to the fourth one, which is the Supreme Court recently overruled 50 years of affirmative action precedent and now has limited use of race and ethnicity in hiring or in university admissions. And some have taken this to hiring. And so there have been folks who have approached firms, law firms, and corporations to dismantle a lot of diversity programs. And so one of the things that we have to worry about, I think, in Texas especially, is we have a very diverse state of people of all different backgrounds. And so what are you doing, your firms, your corporations, enterprises, to deal with this situation? And what impact do you think it might have? So why don't we start on this side? So Linda.
Sure. At Mitsui, we definitely understand the benefit of diversity of thought, diversity of backgrounds, diversity of experience. I mean, just approaching problems from different viewpoints, and that helps to bring about a better solution. If you've got 10 people in the room that all have the same background, why have 10 people in the room? You don't need that many. So by having that kind of viewpoint about the value of diversity of experience and background, we are trying to ensure, of course, within the bounds of the law and what we're permitted to do, that we're at least having, the recruiting pool, the talent pool, we're seeing a larger number of people, so we can make sure that we have a diverse talent pool that we're looking at. Before this Supreme Court decision, it was unlawful to use, physical characteristics and things like that in your hiring decisions anyway. So that's not changing. We, of course, are not going to be doing that. But we do really value the diversity that brings. And so we are making sure that our policies and procedures are compliant with applicable law and that we're, valuing different viewpoints.
Thank you, Cody. Thank you, Linda. Cody's next.
Thank you for that question, Dean Baynes. When I reflected on this question, when the dean presented it to us, I thought about Houston is obviously the headquarters for 70% of oil and gas companies across the world. We're the original international business in the city that is the most multinational city in the United States. And we have benefited in large part from all the human capital that the diversity of the energy industry brought to us. Then we bolted onto that, our from a GDP perspective, energy is what drives Houston. From an employment perspective, the medical center and our hospitals is what drives Houston. Think of all the incredible talent, diverse talent that has come from all over the globe to Houston, and how we have benefited and become the most multinational, most diverse city in the country. And we benefited greatly from that human capital. I am concerned that this decision perhaps puts that at risk in the future. And I think we should, so first of all, I think we should recognize that. As I've been advised to say, within the limits of the law, we are, what are we doing at SCS? I think that what we're seeing from the Supreme Court is arguably for 50 years what at least half of our population took for granted as progressive ideas that had become social mores in America. Accepted, entrenched social mores are not. They're being rolled back. And so we have to think at a corporate level, what does that mean for our core values, and what ideas can we, within the limits of the law, promote and be intentional about acting upon, and that are not controversial with all your stakeholders. So for us at SCS, one small thing we do, for example, is we plant a grove of 100 trees for every project, every product that we sell. Every time we sell a product, we plant 100 trees. And so that's something that signals to our employees, to our customers, that we care about environmentalism. That idea came through diversity, through a group of people that were very different from each other, sitting down and reimagining what could a traditional oil and gas manufacturing company do that had some social responsibility to it. And so it's too soon to know
how these actions by the Supreme Court are going to affect us and our businesses. But I think it's important as business leaders to be intentional about finding your own core values, including diversity, and within the limits of the law, being very intentional and very purposeful and very transparent about acting on that.
Thank you, Deonne. Thank you, Cody. Deonne next.
I think I have the benefit of working for a Black man that started his own hedge fund. And so this, this case this precedent that's been overturned, it really isn't going to have an impact on my organization because we're already a diverse organization. I was hired by our business leaders to bring even more diversity into our fund and to bring more awareness to students that may not know that this world exists, about what we do in the space that we actually do business in, which is the energy space. Most of my career has been about fostering diversity and really, building upon different backgrounds in the various roles that I've held, and I will continue to do so as General Counsel of Skylar Capital Management. So one of the things that I've recently gotten approval of, which I'll share with you today, Dean, is that I do have approval to start a legal internship at the fund. So that's
Do you need some law school students?
I do. I do. So I'll be in touch with you about that after this. But that's how we're planning for the future. Every summer we have an internship program with various colleges in the United States. We accept applications on a rolling basis so that we are cultivating that talent at the inception at a university level and now at a law school level.
Can't wait.
Me too. I need the help.
Thank you. Carrie's next.
Sure. So I think there are kind of two different questions on this, or two main themes maybe. One is, as far as the Supreme Court decision and how that is going to trickle through candidates that are available in certain disciplines and degrees. As Cody said, I don't think we can't measure that yet, but I think all corporations and all leadership teams have an obligation, and hopefully it is generally part of the core values of a company to truly recognize and value diversity, again, across all different, in all different ways. The diversity of experience and background, again, is just so incredibly important, and that is very often tied to some of these immutable characteristics that, how people, what the environments, the communities that they grew up in. And for us, and we're a pretty small company, we have about 110 employees or so, and about 65 or 70 of those employees are in my reporting structure. And through my professional experiences, having started in the oil and gas industry in '98, where things were much better than they had been for the generation of women that came before me, they were not there then, and we are not there now. And to Cody's point, I think I personally, I had accepted that there were some norms and things that were in place that now seem that maybe people weren't thinking as similarly about some of those things as I would have hoped. And so it has always been a focus of mine to, since I've been in a position to be a hiring manager and build teams and be able to influence that diversity in a lot of different ways. But I think good corporate citizens make sure that to do what they can in creating that diversity and signaling and following through in both action and words, that it is so incredibly important, but to make that effort to, regardless of what the Supreme Court is saying, you can focus on that, create that core value, ensure that it's communicated throughout the company, that is part of your culture. And so that's, I think, kind of our stance on it at Blackstone.
Thank you, Carrie. Gregory?
Sure. I guess the situation in my company is similar to everyone else's, but somewhat different. Diversity is sort of interwoven in strange ways throughout our company, and in other ways it's not. You know, I tell people that we are owned by an Argentine billionaire of Italian ancestry who has investments in Argentina, Uruguay, the United States, Canada, Scandinavia, Europe, and some of his main business partners are Chinese, i.e. the Chinese state government and oil and gas institutions. But then at the same time, we're in the oil and gas energy space, which historically is not exactly the most diverse industry in the country by a long shot. But then on the other hand, our company is a relatively young company, somewhat of a startup, vertically integrated in a lot of ways, and we are dying for people. We're looking for people of all types: finance people, engineers, lawyers, equipment operators, turbine operators, patent and technology people. So it's sort of been interwoven in a lot of strange and ways that I never could have predicted. And as a result of that, we have sort of an interesting workforce, you know, in terms of our corporate offices. You know, I think it's very diverse because we are a young company who has come of age, you know, relatively recently in the past, I don't know, 6 to 7 years, frankly. So we have a lot of diversity in that regards, but then if you were to go out into the people running some of our equipment, might not necessarily be as diverse. But when I go out in the field, and most recently I was surprised, there were a number of women equipment operators who I never would have expected. I was like, wait a minute, what's going on here? But then I was like, well, we're looking for people and they can run equipment just like anyone else. So I think the thing that's been driving us and part of our success is somewhat that diversity of thought, that background and experience, you know, that our owner brings to us, that some of our corporate team brings to us at the home office, but then also carrying over into the field with our equipment operators as well. But at the same time, we still do have to guard against, and I find myself trying to be the voice. We are still in the oil and gas industry, oil field services. So there are a lot of ways of doing business that are traditional that still creep up into our business. And every once in a while, you do need that one person who's a little bit different in the room to say, why are we doing it this way? Why does it have to be this way? And I am relatively confident that when that voice is raised, you know, people at least listen, there's a discussion, and there is somewhat of a debate going on as to, do we have to do it the same way? Can we do it differently? Is there another approach to take? And I think at the end of the day, you know, the most important thing is you won't always win every battle, but you should at least be heard. And you should at least be heard seriously, and your ideas and thoughts should be taken into account and given consideration. And I think we do a good job of that. So hopefully, notwithstanding the Supreme Court decision, that's something that won't change going forward, that there will at least be that debate that's heard and listened to.
Thank you, Gregory. So the other question is sort of related to this is that, you know, we recently had the Supreme Court opinion, I guess 2 years ago, dealing with the overturning of Roe versus Wade. And in Texas, we've had, you know, some press reports about women who are not able to get care when they had problematic pregnancies and whatnot. There's also been referendum in many states dealing with this. So it's been a hot button issue. I know for us as a law school, it's been really challenging to recruit women from outside the state. in terms of faculty positions, that has just been the case, has been if the women are from the state, it actually is easier. But there's been really a challenge in this past year to recruit women who come from outside Texas. And so I wonder whether you're experiencing that in your industry, in your business, and what you may be doing about it. So I want to start with Gregory.
Sure. I can't say that the decision in Dobbs overturning Roe versus Wade has had a really direct impact on our company, on our business. It's not something that frankly comes up very often. To the extent that it would have an impact, I would expect that it would be something really more along the lines of, as the dean sort of mentioned in his circumstance, making it difficult to recruit people to the state, trying to get people to return to the state. You know, I am mindful of the fact that I've got a young son who's just started college. He's out of state, probably in a very opposite state of Texas. He's going to school in New York. What's he going to think when it's time for him to decide, where he's going to work after he graduates? What will his peers think? If he does something, which I fear, meet some young girl from Connecticut, is she going to want to move down from Connecticut to Texas, when all she hears on the news are not necessarily things that the younger generation believes in or is willing to support. So I can't see it having a direct day-to-day impact. I would be more concerned about the macro impact upon bringing new people into the state, getting people to return from the state. I'm very mindful of the concept of brain drain. Brain drain, yes, that's what I'm trying to say. I grew up in Louisiana, spent most of my life there, and lots of money, time, and energy was literally invested in me, and they're not getting a return on that investment because I moved to another state. So, that is something that I think every state governmental leader should be conscious of and aware of. Obviously, these are certainly hot button issues which people feel strongly about, but to the extent that you are a governmental leader, I think you have to take these things into account in terms of what is the impact on that, in terms of the reflection that it creates for your state.
Thank you, Gregory. Carrie?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you adopted us, Gregory. I am
Or that I was adopted.
Right, yes. I'm a lifelong Texan, except for the year that I spent in New Orleans working for Shell. And I grew up in a very small town in the Texas Panhandle. My parents still lived there. My sister was the mayor of Amarillo for 6 years. So, having grown up in Texas and loving the state so much, as far as this impact and our ability to hire people, we're, again, a smaller company, so at that 100 employee range, I don't think that we will see a noticeable and direct impact. But what I do think, this goes back to Cody's point on the social norms, and especially with what hits the media about local government, the Texas legislature, and how things are discussed and what that signals to people from outside the state as far as recruiting and retaining people here. I don't think it's representative completely of the state, because the state is very diverse even on these political issues, but there's definitely that perception, and as we all know, perception is often reality. And so I do think that I think it is having an impact, and it has been for a while, but at the same time, people also tend to go where the jobs are, and fortunately, we are a state that's growing, and in this industry with energy transition and even traditional hydrocarbons, which I believe will still be the primary source of energy for, globally, and at least through my lifetime, we have the benefit of being a job growth state, and that may overcome reluctance to, for people to move here from outside of the state.
Thank you, Carrie. Next, Deonne.
The aftermath of the Dobbs decision doesn't really impact Skylar Capital Management or even the family office for Bill Perkins. I would say for the industry as a whole, it does have a chilling effect in attracting talent from, particularly into Texas, from outside states, especially younger women that are interested in working in oil and gas or working in renewable projects that are based here in Texas. I've had conversations, prior to this role, had conversations with young women that were in Illinois or other states that were wanting to come to Houston or work in Chicago, and they were wanting to really focus more in Illinois just simply due to this decision that was being made. I think with oil and gas companies as a general and this industry, I think there has to be I think for bigger oil and gas companies, I think there's a reluctancy to go outside of the norms in extending, parental leave for mothers that are facing these decisions for childbearing or for maternity reasons. If you're looking in the private equity space, I think there is a little bit more flexibility in that area. And so that is more attractive to younger employees as opposed to working for a traditional oil and gas company. For myself, when I was working as an associate general counsel for Symmetry Energy, I was grateful for the fact that although I had just joined that company, they gave me 12 weeks of paid maternity leave. And I hadn't worked for the company for longer than a year. I just joined that company when I found out I was pregnant. So there is flexibility in that landscape, which I think could lend itself valuable to other companies to take a look at and try to institute within their own policies and procedures for women that are of the childbearing age, or families in general that are of the childbearing age that are wanting to pursue IVF or adoption or other methods.
Thank you, Deonne. Cody?
Yeah, to segue a little bit from the last question to this one, I want to point out to the group that in the area of energy transition and in the area of carbon capture and sequestration, it is led by a lot of incredible women. So we are blessed with, for example, the National Petroleum Council study that was published in 2019 was chaired by a friend of mine, Cindy Yielding, one of the most incredible geologists of our generation, and a great businesswoman, a director on the board of directors of Denbury, which is, owns most of the CO2 pipeline that super CO2 and supercritical phase can go through. Cindy was the chairperson of that study. One of her colleagues on the study was another friend of mine, Jane Stricker, incredible businesswoman and the executive chair of HEDI, now here in Houston. HEDI is known, I don't know what y'all's experience is, but whether I'm in Europe, Asia, the Northeast, even in New York, everybody's very interested and encouraged about HEDI. And so we have some incredible women leading the energy transition, some incredible women professionals in this space. The Women in Energy organization here in Houston, I see a few of y'all in the crowd that have been. I wish I could get invited to those meetings. I would very much like to.
No.
But no, when I see y'all's posts on LinkedIn, I'm very jealous. Y'all got it's an impressive group of executives. So I want to point that out. In this space, we're leading. Let's not lose that lead, right? Let's build on that lead with regards to diversity. let's not let that lead go to someone else. With regards to the Dodd decision and Roe v. Wade and how that affects recruitment, again, I think it's too early to tell at the moment. But, you know, our founding fathers put together a system where that we could compete on ideas and on execution. And so what the Supreme Court's done is they have, as Dean said, devolved this to the states. And now, as states, we are going to compete on ideas and execution. And capital, human, and otherwise will flow where the ideas and the execution are made most efficient and productive. And I think, you know, you can be on either side of how you think that's going to work, but it's been a few years since Professor Oren taught me constitutional law here, but I believe that's how our founding fathers set it up, and so we're the stewards of that system, and so regardless of where you see that Texas should be from a policy perspective on that, we need to be intentional about competing on our ideas and on our execution, and then live with the results.
Thank you, Cody. Next, Linda.
Well, I agree that I think it is too early to tell the impact on our companies. Mitsui has offices all over the U.S., and they tend to recruit locally, so we haven't personally seen any difficulty with recruiting women or young families or anything like that because of the various locations. However, I do share Gregory's concern with the potential brain drain. I have teenagers. I have a daughter who's a junior in high school. My son is a freshman. My daughter is looking at colleges now. And I hear the conversations. Her friends are over all the time, and they're talking. And they're, not all of them, but many of them are like, I can't wait to get out of here. And, you know, there's a lot of great things about Texas. We're New Yorkers, so, you know, I've had both sides of things, so there's pros and cons no matter where you are. But I do worry about that for Texas and other states that have similar, you know, values in their, you know, regulations, because people are making decisions based upon these, about where they're going to live, where they're going to study, where they're going to work. And so I do think that that's something we need to think about.
Thank you. Next question. According to the Department of Energy website, the Inflation Reduction Act represents the most ambitious climate action in history and is catalyzing game-changing investments in clean energy. The IRA, see my emphasis? The IRA is driving clean energy renaissance, creating high-quality union jobs for American workers, delivering healthier and safer communities, and reinforcing the United States' role as a global leader in the industries of the future. So what is the IRA? What has it been on your industry? What effect has it been on your industry, your business? And have you used it in any way that would lead to, you know, to energy transition, carbon capture, infrastructure repurposing, or more resilient electricity grid? So we left off with Linda. We'll go to Linda again this time.
Sure. And we are definitely trying to use it. I mentioned the carbon capture and sequestration project we're working on. We're looking at those amended 45Q credits for that. We're also looking at 45Q credits for blue ammonia projects. We have a Texas solar project that we're looking at the production tax credits for. There's a lot of requirements, the wage and hour and all of those types of requirements that we need to make sure we're building in with the EPC contractor and the other subcontractors to ensure that we meet those and don't lose the credits. But these are still expensive. Even with substantial subsidies, these projects are still expensive. So, for example, one of the projects we were looking at our LNG facility was adding on an additional train. But the EPC costs right now are so high that even with those credits, it's not we've had to shelve that temporarily. We're looking at, ways to make that more efficient, and these would all be good for the environment and good for further production, but just the costs are too much. So lots of complexity and still expensive, but we are looking to utilize them in any way we can.
Thank you, Cody. Thank you, Linda. Cody next.
Yeah, so I think the first thing I would tell the group is the IRA and the 45Q and 45V credits, as you heard from some of the panels prior to us, are years away. So one of the things I would say is, what about Quad O, B and C, EPA, methane detection and emission reduction, massive amounts of business opportunity and environmental opportunity related to a greenhouse gas that's, CH4 methane is 40 times, has 40 times the greenhouse gas warming effects of CO2. So what we're doing today is focusing on methane versus CO2 and hydrogen with regards to execution. But with regards to being a thought leader in engineering, in policy and permitting, that's where we're playing in the CO2 and the hydrogen space. I think what is holding up everything is simply it's the Class 6 sequestration drilling permits. There's nowhere to go with the CO2. If you can't store it, what are you going to do with it? Right? So until the logjam of with the Class 6 permits breaks free, nothing substantial is going to happen, I don't believe, with regards projects reaching FID. I think if you saw, a handful of projects get approved by Louisiana, which they've only had sovereignty for, basically 120 days. Let's give them a minute. You see a handful of projects get approved, I think you could see a lot of momentum. And then we're going to all be trying to catch up. So I think being thought leaders in your design, engineering, innovation, having all of that pre-done is important, because I think when those Class 6 permits do start getting issued, I'll be very interested to see when Texas gets sovereignty on this, how fast we can get it done. But you see some of that happen, and you could be from hurry up and wait to, oh my God, I'm way behind, I can't catch up. So I used to be a team roper, and when you nod your head, you better be ready to go. So that's the first thing I would advise. I think also though, want to put a little plug in on policy. What I think we also should be ready for. I think with everything that's occurring geopolitically and economically, when we talk about carbon capture and sequestration, when we talk about DAC, when we talk about direct air capture, when we talk about all the different ways that we can potentially sequester carbon, capture it and sequester it, it reminds me of something that old football coach used to tell me. He said, son, you're a mile wide and an inch deep. You need to get an inch wide and a mile deep. and so I think we need to focus on something is what that means. And I think the huge opportunity that we have with all of the geopolitical issues that we've talked about and the economic opportunities and issues that we have is we produce a tremendous amount of hydrogen on the Texas Gulf Coast. I mean, it's something like 80% of what's produced. And we use that in our refineries along the Houston Ship Channel and between Corpus Christi and Lake Charles. We use that for various petrochemical processes today. We produce a tremendous amount of hydrogen. That hydrogen is produced from natural gas. We pipe in methane from the Permian Basin. We use a steam methane reforming technology to crack the methane into pure hydrogen and CO2. Then we use that hydrogen in our refining processes, a tremendous amount. 90% of the pipeline that can carry hydrogen is within 75 miles of where we're sitting today. That, we take the CO2 and we release that into the atmosphere today. With carbon capture technology that we've been using and that's been around since the 1970s, we can capture that CO2, and if we can get these Class 6 permits, and I think when we get them, one of the most, we can reach all of our CO2 capture goals, or get almost all the way there, just by capturing all the CO2 off of steam methane reforming at the Houston Ship Channel. We sequester it. We've got the geology to sequester it also here. So we've got a dense source of emitters. We've got pipeline infrastructure, industry, and communities that are comfortable with this sort of activity. And we've got the geology to sequester it. And then we've got the cherry on top is the Port of Houston. So if we do that, we can double our production of hydrogen. Everybody hates the colors, but it does help us communicate. We go from gray hydrogen to blue hydrogen. We're able then to export probably half of our production to Europe because they have a huge appetite for decarbonized hydrogen. We have an export industry, and it's we sat in some hydrogen symposium here on campus yesterday, and we were told that would have an economic GDP effect of $100 billion on Texas, and most of that would be in the greater Houston area. So I think, leave you with one thought on this question is, the string is quad-O methane today. We got to get the Class 6 permits rolling, and that's probably a sovereignty issue, getting that from EPA in Texas. Then let's focus on turning our existing gray hydrogen production into blue. Let's use our existing industrial complex, our existing human resources, capital, finance, everything that we already have. We have most of it in the room today, looking around. Use that to create a decarbonized hydrogen export industry for a very hungry customer in Europe that can no longer get methane, get natural gas from Russia, to be able to turn it into the hydrogen of their own.
Thank you, Cody. Deonne, next.
I'll be brief in my response, because I know that we're running a little bit short on time. But we, in my organization, we haven't utilized the IRA typically because most of our projects are short-term, for better sense of term, short-term hedge opportunities. So our projects that we've developed on the solar and the battery storage side are small megawatt projects in the 9 megawatt to 12 megawatt range. I do know of some competitors in the battery storage and the solar project community that have applied for the tax credits, the ITC and the production tax credits. They also include that in with their and their cost analysis of the project overall, how big the project is going to be, on the battery storage side, the duration of the battery, how long the battery project is going to be cycling. They include all of that in their projections when they're trying to finance the project and also either build it from the ground up or sell it. For us, when we have sold off our projects, the purchasers of our projects have built this into our transactions to benefit from those tax credits. at the close of the sale. But I think for us, it's been difficult for us to utilize, the benefits of the IRA simply because of the way that the interconnection process works at the various RTOs, at ERCOT, at PJM, and CAISO. The interconnection costs are tremendous. If you are upgrading any of the facilities, that also adds on to the interconnection costs. Those are due within, I would say, 30. It depends on depends on the utility, but depends on. It'd be 30 to 60 to 90 days. Those interconnection costs are due, and we have a private investor, so. It's beneficial for us to do that as a short-term hedge, but for other projects that are bigger in scale for a longer duration of time, the IRA is just a pretty laborious process, and so it's better to have a private investor come in and help you fund the cost of the project and get it developed and operational, as opposed to waiting years down the line, unless you have a project that you see that is going to be for a long-term project for 20 to 25 years, which I have seen some of those, but most of the projects that I've been working on have been in a very short term.
Thank you. Carrie next.
So there is a direct impact on the business at Blackstone, just because we do have a new ventures group that's under me, and just we are open to ideas. We have people coming in all the time that are making proposals to us or new ideas, trying to capitalize on potential development of the assets we own that is not related to oil and gas, like carbon sequestration, lithium, helium, hydrogen. There's a lot of stuff out there. I think on the, I'll kind of tie this to the last question too, which is there is also some, the domestic political uncertainty is very significant. Obviously, we all know that. I worked for a wholesale generation and transmission electric co-op for 3 years, and at that time, the carbon, the uncertainty when you're talking about long-term power supply planning and things like that at billion-dollar projects with a 40-year capital life, it is so hard to make those kinds of decisions with so much uncertainty. And we talked about this a bit the other day too, but you look back 20 years ago, I was a TA for Professor Jacqueline Weaver here at the law school, and one of the projects was updating her international oil and gas law book, and there was so much focus at that time on peak oil and the peak oil hitting at 2020 was kind of what the topic at the time was. I spent a lot of time researching that for her. And so you just take that, that was 20 years ago. Even looking back over the last 8 years since the 2016 presidential election, it's just all so connected. And it feels unstable because it is unstable. So we all just make the most educated guesses that we can and hope that we're right. So, I think with respect to not just the IRA, but other plans that have been in place, the fact that a lot of the new ventures type projects are not economic without the subsidies, and the subsidies are not, there's no certainty around those subsidies. So I think that's why you have generally a business model of kind of project developers and flippers, because they're not going to take that long-term risk. But we need people to be doing those things and making those investments, because it will diversify and help, with that energy transition. So kind of covering a lot of different things, but that are all connected. And I just think it's hard to tell. Yes, it impacts our business. Yes, we are looking at all of those things, but it's just unpredictable.
Thank you, Gregory. And you want to like tie them together, last two questions together too?
Don't worry, I'll be brief. I can say that we have spent a lot of time looking at the Inflation Reduction Act to see if it would apply to our business. I've spent a lot of time doing that myself as well. I've spent too much time listening to my brother, whose business is directly impacted by it, tell me all about it and listen to him. We just haven't been able to find an angle to sort of make it work for us, under which we would qualify. So although we are very excited, that it helps reinforce the ESG narrative that a lot of our customers have, it's not something that is having a direct impact on our business.
Great. I think we'll bypass the last question, maybe take some questions from the audience, because we have like 5 or so minutes, I guess. Or so. Okay. Any questions from the audience for our esteemed panel? No questions. All right, well, thank you. Let's thank our panelists. Excellent job.